Hi, I'm Andy Pitts. Welcome to Saturday in the Shop, where we talk woodworking and I try to answer some of the questions you've posted on my YouTube channel, Andy Pitts 1000. I have a friend who asked me to make some signs for a cottage that he has that he rents. I made a sign of a high-density closed-cell foam. This is what it looks like in the rough. It's very light, but the components of this are, think of small spheres of plastic that are completely enclosed, so water can't get absorbed into this and water can't destroy it. So high-density closed-cell foam makes a really nice sign, really light. This particular foam I'm using is called Precision Board Plus. It machines on the ShopBot very easily. Stuff cuts like butter. But the foam has a tendency to shed little particles, and it's got a little bit of a rough surface. So when you're finished cutting, you have to prime it a couple of coats with this very thick primer. Now, this stuff's called FSC 88, and this stuff is like pancake batter. Let me see if I can show you. It is really, really thick. And so you put a couple of coats on this, and then you have to let it dry a long, long time because the foam doesn't absorb any of the moisture out of the primer. That's all the moisture has to escape from the top. So it's really important to let this dry. Then when you hang this, you don't just screw an eye bolt into it, but what you do is you drill a hole that's 1.5 times or so larger in diameter than the eye bolt, that you can put the eye bolt in and then epoxy all around it. So the hole gets filled with the epoxy, and that's what really holds the eye bolt. So we've got 2 eye bolts in the top of this sign, and I've also got 2 eye bolts that are going to go in the bottom because underneath this sign hangs the sign that gives the reservations number. And then I've also put 1 eye bolt hole in the bottom of this sign so that when he hangs this from he's got like an L-shaped wooden stand. When he hangs it, he can actually connect a little piece of chain or monofilament line or something like that from here over to the post. So the wind comes, it doesn't have a tendency to flap like this. It's somewhat restricted in how much it can move. And all he's got to do now is get out his paint and spend hours painting these letters. But hey, that's the fun of it. I received a question from Tom. He wanted to know about my CNC bits, you know, where I get them, what type I use, that sort of thing. Most of my bits are Onsrud. That's O-N-S-R-U-D. And they make a really wide selection of bits. They produce a catalog here that has a lot of information about all the different kind of materials you might cut and what the recommended bits are and the sizes of the bits and so forth. And I usually buy them from a place called the Advanced Machine Tool Store because they have good shipping rates, quantity discounts, that sort of thing, and they've just worked very well for me. Some of my bits are more specialized, like this bottom cutting bit or planer bit, and this I got from Magnate. Now, a little bit about these bits. There's various kinds. Probably the most common bit is a 1/4 inch upcut bit, just a flat end mill. These are all solid carbide. You've got down cut bits where the chip is forced down instead of pulled up. There are ball nose bits. I use them a lot. It's just like an end mill except it's got a rounded nose. There are engraving bits with pointed so you can do some V carving and so forth. Then I use some thicker bits. Here's a 3/8 inch ball nose. Gives you a little more strength and stability in the cutter. I use a lot of 1/2 inch bits. Here's a 1/2 inch ball nose. This really is rigid and won't shatter. 1/2 inch straight bit Now that straight cut is a carbide tipped bit. It's got carbide blades brazed to the steel shank. So some of the bits end up being carbide tipped. Here's a big V bit, a 60-degree V bit, and a 1/2-inch shank with carbide tips. Here's a 120-degree V bit. One of the bits I use a whole lot is a little 1/16-inch ball nose bit. It's got an 1/8-inch shank. ShopBot themselves have a special 16th-inch tapered ball nut. Goes from 1/4 inch all the way down to a 16th-inch ball nose point. A little stronger, a little less chatter, and a much deeper flute than the little 1/8-inch shank. Here it is, 1/8-inch shank, which only has a 1/4 inch flute. You can see the difference. Equally important with the bits are the collets that fit around the bit. This is a collet. It fits inside a collet nut. The collet nut screws onto the spindle, and this is what clamps the bit. So you put that in. You make sure the bit goes all the way through the collet if possible. Sometimes it's not possible, but you want to get, at least 80%, because you don't want the collet getting squeezed up here where there's no bit and deforming the whole thing. It's important that this collet hold the bit evenly along its whole length. Another thing that's important about collets is to keep them clean. So every time I change a bit, I pull the collet out, I tap it on the bench along with the nut, get all the dust out, put it back together, put the new bit in. A little bit of dust in these fine divisions here on this collet will clog it up and cause it to grab unequally, and then your bit will slip. Speaking about slipping, here's a brand new planer cut or a bottom cut from a Magnate. They put oil on it so it won't rust. You got to get that oil off. I learned by experience. I didn't know that at first. I just wiped them down, put the bits into the collet, put it on the machine, and the next thing I know, the bit is slipping down into the work, making a big gouge. I learned that you got to take these bits and you got to clean them in naphtha or something like that to get that oil off. The second part of Tom's question, he asked, where do I get the 3D software models that I use? And for the most part, I get them from vectorart3d.com online. You can download them. Typical price, $25 for a model. They come in 3 different styles. The A style is like this hummingbird and flower. It's just a full relief model. So when you cut it, the background is relieved from the model itself. And in this case, I glued this on as an applique. The B style uses a nice smooth dish. This Navy officer's crest is set into this dish. And the C style is similar to the B style in that the dish has a scalloped edge. The other way you can get models is to make them. Using Aspire software or some similar software, you can actually make your own models. In this case, I modified the Navy officer's crest to become a public health service officer's crest by removing an anchor, installing the caduceus, and a couple of chains instead of ropes. And so it's a hybrid.